Oh, now you be quiet. I believe we're live, but I usually get the talking. It just says.
I'll just risk it.
No what?
Nothing.
It says it's streaming.
All right.
You know.
Okay, I think we're good to go. So let's call the order of the Lake Stevens Planning Commission meeting to order. I think we start with the pledge.
Where's the flag?
The American flag. Okay, there we go. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'll ask for everyone's indulgence tonight while I kind of work my way through this. And please step in if I miss something. Next order of business is the roll call. Looks like we're all here, but I think we need a motion to excuse Todd Welch, who is out today.
I'll second.
We have a move and second. Is there discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 3 on the agenda, guest business. Is there any guest business today?
I don't think we got.
No. Do we have any comments in the email?
No.
Okay.
And do we have any city council members part of our meeting yet this evening?
No.
Perhaps we can check later on in the meeting.
Okay.
So far, no, but
Okay.
usually that's.
Okay, so that moves us on to action items, approving the minutes of June 1st, 2022. Hopefully everybody had a moment to go over those. Were there any comments or corrections on that?
I think I just had a clerical thing where on the approval, I think it's missing second for Commissioner Holt. Seconded.
Approval for what?
Is it supposed to say that Commissioner Holt seconded the approval?
Of what? The
Of the
minutes?
minutes.
Sure, you got it. Thank you.
It kind of still makes sense.
Okay.
I'm not trying to mistake.
Any other edits or comments? Okay, then do we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
Yeah, so.
Seconded.
Okay, move in second, all in favor? Aye. Motion passes. On to item 5, discussion items, Part A, Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Development 2022 with Planning Manager Levitan.
All right. Well, thank you, commissioners. David Levitan, planning manager. So we're here tonight to continue our discussion, our kind of work sessions on the 2022 comprehensive plan docket. If you'll remember at our May 18th meeting, I believe, we introduced the proposed updates to the land use element, at least kind of some initial thoughts on that. There's some additional work that we still need to do, and we plan on bringing that back on July 15th, or I guess July 20th. That's when we'll also be discussing some of the map amendments that are included as part of the docket, the city initiated one, as well as the citizen initiated one for specific parcels there on 20th Street. But tonight we're here to introduce proposed updates to the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space element. And it's included as attachment 1, track changes versions of that. Similar to previous years, it is pretty limited in scope as far as the text of the chapter, the narrative. It has some updates, addition of Bryce Park, some changes to some of the proposed capital projects. The main amendments that are included, kind of the most substantial as part of this year's Parks update, is the actual addition of 2 goals as well as underlying policies. Those were items that came out of discussions primarily with our Parks Coordinator, Jill Meese, and also with Russ, Community Development Director. A lot of it was driven by a lot of the grant funding they applied to and some of the criteria related to that, and they identified some deficiencies in the existing comprehensive plan goals and policies that they thought not only would they be helpful for applying for grants, but just identified kind of some topic areas that have been identified as community priorities, but maybe weren't adequately reflected in the existing goals and policies. So if you look at attachment 1 and go to page P39, so that it adds goal 5.4, which is to assert parks and recreation as critical infrastructure and vital public service. And that's really just elevating and identifying what a high priority parks are in the city of Lake Stevens. Felt that that was something that was worthwhile adding in that goal, and then adding in the 3 policies that are nested under that goal that talk about advocating for funding, expanding the system, and then reviewing growth impacts. So it kind of ties it in with a lot of the land use related topics that are already so paramount within the comprehensive plan, but really kind of identifying it as that important critical infrastructure and a vital public service. Similar to that, if you go a little bit further down in attachment 1, let me scroll down if I can. So there's the addition of the last goal. So it's on the last couple pages. Actually the last page, which is goal 511, which is to expand active recreation facilities. A lot of the grant funding and really a lot of what we're hearing from the community is a desire for these more active recreation components. We've obviously seen skate parks, we've seen ball fields, we've seen all sorts of things that the city's been able to build out, especially over the last few decades, but especially, probably even much more over the last few years. And so that was the addition of goal 5.11, as well as 3 underlying policies, and really identifying that priority of active recreation facilities within the city of Lake Stevens. So those were kind of 2 of the major additions. The remainder of them, there's some map amendments that we need to do related to some of the parks additions, some of the radius maps as far as the levels of service, updating some of the tables that commissioners were very diligent in reviewing last year, and appreciated your feedback on those. But really, we're just looking on thoughts on these new goals, as well as any of the other proposed amendments. I'll note that this element was reviewed by the Parks Board on Monday night. I talked to Jill Meese about it, and there were very limited comments on that. They didn't have any proposed changes. They were pretty comfortable with the goal and policy language there, the additional goals and policies, and didn't really see anything else within the element that needed to be revised or added. So we're looking for feedback from the Planning Commission tonight on really anything related to the parks element. If there's additional items that you'd like to see reflected in there, I think that's something that we can discuss, and just wanted to get the commission's preliminary feedback. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Planning Manager Lipton. We'll open up open it up to comment from the commission.
Yeah, I can start. I'm always in support of updating any of the changes that have been going. I know we've done this a couple times since I've been on the commission, but specifically, I don't have too much criticism at all. But just in reading through it, I support even the Cedarwood Clubhouse. I really like some of the stuff the city is focusing on in terms of funding that clubhouse, kind of where it's located, being far from the Boys and Girls Club. A place we're used to go, I think is going to be a great addition to the city on that side. And then Bonneville being improved, I agree with Planning Manager Levitan on, and I guess what he said about what the citizens are looking for with recreational facilities, baseball fields, things like that, just to get more engagement. And I think those can also, like the tournaments, lead to people actually coming and using our facilities, on a bigger scale. So I'm in full support of those. And then as far as the goals, I see nothing wrong with the goals. I think it's important to, have them in writing, just so you can be specific enough to, have a line of sight in terms of what you want to achieve. But I think all those are great goals. It'll be good for the city as far as finding out ways to fund these parks and accomplish what they need to. So sorry, I wasn't more constructive there, but good job.
And how are we paying for all this? Because you have 100,000, 30,000, that 1,600,000. How are we paying for? Are we getting I don't know, some sort of funding from outside the city, or what's the scoop with that?
Yeah, so we The city does apply for a lot of grant funds. That was part of the impetus for especially some of the language about the active recreation and the critical infrastructure was just kind of elevating the priority of parks and really making a stronger tie to our comprehensive plan and noting that it is very much rooted in the comprehensive plan as far as the desire for, a very robust park system within the city. So we do backfill, kind of general funds where grant funds are available, but all of these items are included within, because these are capital facility projects, these projects will also be listed within the capital facilities element, which then is filtered down into the 20-year plan and the 6-year plan. And then moving on from the 6-year plan, it goes through the budgeting process with the city council. So all of these things that have line item amounts, there'll be work as part of the capital facilities element. If those numbers don't already match what's in the capital facilities element, which is then factored into the city council's budget, all of those things will be reconciled as we work on that capital facilities element over the next few months. And the capital facilities and the public services are probably the last two elements, and we expect to discuss those during your second meeting in August. The next meeting would be land use, that would be July. And then kind of the two remaining chapters would be capital facilities and public services, and that would be in August.
Hey, David, if I may, the last time that we discussed parks, and I can't remember if it was in the May meeting or if it was one of the meetings last year, there was rumblings about conversations of renting, being able to rent a park or a picnic bench or a gazebo, or like as a private citizen, you could come in and rent part of the space. I didn't see any of that wording in this document. Is that still a focus from the Parks Board and Jill, or is that something that we're taking out of the mix to allow everybody to use it sort of on first come, first served basis?
Yeah, I would have to check in with Jill to see kind of any subsequent conversations that she'd have with Parks Board members. They, I can't speak for them. The fact that they reviewed the document and some of the proposed additions and some of the proposed goal and policy additions and didn't identify proposed language specifically related to that, I would think probably infers that they didn't think that needed to be elevated to the comp plan level, but that's something that I can ask her directly. And we're still in the process of updating these. We still need to make some additional changes to some of the maps and all of that. So if there are areas where commissioners feel like that would be well integrated either into the narrative or even in goals and policies, we're not, other than the additional goals and policies, weren't looking to make a whole lot of policy changes. But if there are items that would be kind of easily amended, that's definitely something that we can look at. Just stepping back on just as a reminder on the parks element. So that's something that's, similar to how the Department of Commerce reviews the entire comp plan. And we basically have to essentially get it certified. There's a process kind of on this through the state, more through Parks and Recreation, through, I forget what department it is, but they certify the parks element, and that's certified through 2025. We do plan to make a number of goal and policy changes, likely as part of the 2024 periodic update, but we weren't looking at making a ton of goal and policy changes before then. But I'm kind of very, very overly long story short, I'm happy to follow up with Jill on that.
I appreciate that. I don't know if it needs to be in this document necessarily, but certainly it needs to be communicated. And I think the feedback that we received initially was that people were wondering why they have to pay for a public park, why they would have to pay to reserve a public park. So I would just hope that that conversation is being had and that's being communicated out when and if it's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm happy to, I can talk to Russ, as obviously he oversees parks for now. And, that's, I think, a conversation as we kind of bring our fully fledged parks division on board, our parks department on board. and get a new director, I think that's definitely something that we can discuss, and that that person will want to have discussions. I think from the when they rent the shelters at North Cove and at Lundin, I sit right next to the front office staff, and that's literally half their day is fielding those calls. So it's still pretty popular, and people obviously, maybe would prefer that it was free, but that is, those kind of facilities that can be rented are definitely pretty popular right now because everybody calls looking for space.
Just communicate it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Not saying free or charge, I'm just saying make sure that the people know.
Yeah. Okay, no, I appreciate that feedback.
And I do have one comment about the process. When take for instance North Cove Park or Frontier Heights, or the new playground that was built out there, to ensure that there's language included to deal with water mitigation. North Cove Park is effectively unusable, the turf there, for 10 months out of the year. For there to be language included and to make sure that when it comes to drainage, that's something that the city is almost required to not deal with internally with Public Works, but is something that is left to contracted professionals in the interim until the city Parks Department gets really gets the full foundation underneath it. That's a gem of the city, and like I said, that turf is unusable. The entire lawn is unusable for the vast majority of the year, and the new playground that was built is the same issue over there. The city's put in a huge investment in these, and I'd imagine it's going to cost a considerable amount of money to fix the issues with drainage at North Cove. So just to make sure that there's language included in there to deal with those critical elements of these projects.
All right, I appreciate that. No, that's definitely good feedback, something I can bring up, and that's something that we can explore if there's ways to either in the narrative or in some. I would have to quickly scan through the goals and policies to look if there's anything specifically about maintenance and kind of ensuring that our infrastructure is kind of fully thought out, not just the recreational component, but the maintenance component of it as well. I think, yeah, if you build out a system and you can't use it for several months out of the year, then that obviously defeats part of the purpose of having a very robust parks program. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, Lundin, for example, is perfectly fine for solid 10 months out of the year. But North Cove, I was just over there with a group of students from our running club, and even into June. Granted, it's been really wet this spring, but there's some big problems there.
Great.
David.
Commissioner Dewar, is that okay? I know I'm on the screen.
Yeah, please.
I had two comments. One, I love with a capital L, the idea of designating the parks as part of our critical infrastructure. Not only for the reason that you mentioned in the staff report in terms of future grant proposals, which is important, but also when people look at our comp plan, it really highlights what's important to us as a community, and having the parks highlighted in this way is so important. We have such a beautiful natural environment, and we're so family oriented that I'm really in favor of that. I think it's a great idea to shine a spotlight on our park system. And then the second comment I had, it's more of almost a question. It's under the neighborhood parks piece. I noticed that the bathrooms were mentioned, that permanent was crossed out, bathrooms and parking areas, the word permanent was removed. And I was just curious about that. Is that to create more flexibility to put in, I'm wondering in terms of the bathrooms, having dragged children all over our parks. Is that to just create more flexibility going forward as we add new parks?
Yeah, I'd have to check. I did notice that one as well, and I can check with Jill on that. I believe it is to provide more flexibility. And when you look at neighborhood parks, which obviously are smaller in size, may not have as large of an area and may not. I think the expectation or by definition, a neighborhood park doesn't always have permanent restrooms. And so I believe that was the point. I can definitely double check with Jill on that one, but that's the way that I did notice that one, that had been struck. And that I believe it is to provide that additional flexibility.
Got it. Great job. I really like the proposed changes.
I'll just add my 2 cents on the end. I really appreciate that we have both plan that we're highlighting and we're allocating money to back up that plan. I do see there's a number of things in here financially that are being funded by one-time, ARPA money, pandemic relief funds, and that kind of thing. And I get that's a capital expense, but I hope we're also adding to our budget the operations and maintenance side of things, so that these wonderful parks that we're building end up being in excellent condition for years to come. The only question that I had is, I noticed that the funding for Sunset Park went from 500,000 to 1.6 million. Oh, I'm sorry, Cedarwood's Clubhouse went from 500,000 to 1.6 million. That's a pretty hefty jump. Is there a big change order in there, or what's going on?
Yeah, that's another one I'd probably have to defer to Jill and to Russ, just because they kind of full disclosure, Jill had done the track changes on this one and Russ reviewed them. But I can check with her on that. I know that Cedarwood, as they've really gotten in there and identified some of the needs, that's something that the facility that the city was able to acquire. And then I believe that they've gotten in there and identified really what needs to be done is the cost has gone up a lot, but I can get more details on what the scope of that renovation is compared to what was originally identified. Because yeah, that does add about $1.1 million. That's something that's going to need to, work its way through the approval process, through the capital facilities element, and then ultimately through the capital improvement program that it needs to be adopted by the city council. So I'm sure they'll have questions about that as well. But I'm not super familiar with what that kind of tripling of the cost is related to, but I'm happy to find out.
Any other comments before we proceed?
We'll be discussing this, you say, in August?
So we'll be discussing we'll be discussing the capital facilities element, where we also get into a lot of the nuts and bolts of the parks financing, funding. That's basically, within the capital facilities program, there's within the capital facilities element, there's transportation, there's stormwater, there's kind of city facilities, and then that includes park facilities. So there's going to be a chance to really go through the numbers in detail as part of that discussion in August. And I'll definitely have additional information in advance of that to know kind of what some of the revised numbers related to the parks projects, where those came from. I'm assuming as they're getting ready to go out and develop, do RFPs and, potentially look at doing the improvements and establishing the budget. They've been prioritizing projects, and, that's why some of these, the Cedarwood was only added in 2021 as part of the comp plan docket. But yeah, you'll have an additional opportunity to really look through the individual projects as part of our August meeting.
I have just one more comment to Commissioner Davis's point. I think with the bathrooms, there might be a way to, I think a permanent bathroom wherever feasible should be the goal. So there might be just a way to phrase that as if, if it's not feasible, then the temporary situation. I just hate for that to be a reason, for somebody down the road to cut costs or something and not, utilize a permanent bathroom source.
And
Yeah.
feedback on that. I know this last week ago today during the festival, the bathrooms at North Cove were closed, there were no facilities, and people were actively, like, openly talking about like how to
Pine Woods.
to go into the bushes.
Oh.
It was yeah, less than ideal. Yeah, and we
All right.
On that.
On that note, let's wrap up that discussion item and let's move on to item 6, Commissioner report. Commissioner Davis, why don't you lead us off?
I would like to report that I was a customer of the city. We reserved the mill for my daughter's graduation party, and it was fantastic. We were in Hartford Hall, and it was a beautiful facility, super easy to use it. The staff is fantastic. It honestly could not have gone better. It had Bluetooth speaker to play music, and it was just a wonderful experience and easy, affordable. I recommend it to anyone. And it's just, the mill is just kind of a jewel in our downtown. So that's my report.
Thank you, Commissioner Crowe.
No report. Thank you.
Commissioner Holt.
Really, actually, nothing to report except for I just finished I graduated from college in 1986, and I haven't worked since 94. I've been on the planning commission and stuff. My kids taught me taking a class at Everett Community College for spring quarter, so I took Understanding World Art, and today was my last day, my last big project. And I'm like the old lady in the group. I'm 59, and all the students are 23 and younger. But it was a really cool class.
Very cool.
Jenny, I'm sorry, Gary's waiting at the door downstairs.
Congratulations.
Gary's waiting at the door downstairs. I have a quick question, David. Did you attend the city council meeting last night?
I did not. No, Russ was actually on that one. He took a break from his vacation, and then Melissa Place was at that one, but I was not at the meeting.
Can I then update my fellow commissioners on the conversation surrounding Airbnb?
Yeah, you're welcome to as part of your report.
So in the meeting last night, the council meeting last night, Airbnb was essentially kicked to the curb. The commission, the council has assigned a task force to look at this, with the emphasis being that this is not a big hurry to get this done. And my frustration around that, as I've stated before, has been that the urgency is now, that once that train leaves the station this summer, it's going to be even harder to reel in what's going to happen. And some of that has already started, and those comments that came from our community, essentially our waterfront community, are being negated by having this much time go by between when they saw us and when they might potentially be able to get in front of council. The feeling right now with this task force is that it will not go to public comment. They want to make a one and done decision and not have public comment on this. So I'm just letting my fellow commissioners know, and now that we have a city council person in the room with us, that I find it unacceptable that we spent essentially 3 months, again, working on a project that I thought we tied up very, very well. Of course, city council can adjust, and they do, but to negate that amount of work, I think is just unacceptable. So my personal feelings, commissioners can weigh in personally if they want to, but I want to stay a part of that conversation and make sure that it comes to fruition sooner rather than later. Thank you for allowing me the time.
Okay, before we move on to Commissioner Davis, want to welcome Councilmember Peterson to the meeting. Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, Commissioner Huxford, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I was just with a group of colleagues wrapping up the school year, and there were a couple of people that were talking about short-term rentals that have popped up in their neighborhoods, over the last month or so. Just complete, happenstance or coincidence, granted, coming into the meeting today. So yeah, I'll second that there should be a degree of urgency, because for these residents of Lake Stevens, teachers here in Lake Stevens, there's some concern over these short-term rentals that just popped up over the last month. So yeah, I do appreciate you bringing that up. On another note, we wrapped up the school year today, but 2 days ago I took our running club. These are kids that I've worked with for 2 years now. We started off at quarter-mile runs, upwards of 10-mile runs, and we did a loop around, through Northeast Lake Stevens. We went to Sahara Pizza, bought far too many pizzas, and then made our way over to North Cove Park. And I was talking to the students about, the plan for downtown, and their eyes are lighting up. They're so excited about the opportunities that's going to, afford them. They're really excited. So, part of the reason we moved to where we were in Lake Stevens is the downtown master plan. And I'm really excited to see that come to fruition, and just know that these kids are just as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Davis. And for my part, I would echo Commissioner Huxford's concerns about where the short-term housing is going, short-term rental housing is going. It does need to be something that is addressed. I do feel strongly about that, and that when we entered this process, we weren't even sure how many of them there were. We weren't enforcing feels like we were not enforcing the rules and municipal code that we had in place. So times being lost and non-conformity continues to be a problem. So I think that does need to be addressed.
I will just mention that Steve Ewing is heading that task force. Sean Frederick is on that task force, and Angie Jorstadt is on that task force. I intend to reach out to all three of them tomorrow.
I think that concludes Commissioner reports. Our next piece is the Plan Director's report. Plan Manager Leftown, do you have a piece in Russ's absence?
Yeah, so I was just going to touch on the status of a couple of long-range planning projects that the Planning Commission has reviewed in the last couple of weeks, last couple of months. So as Commissioner Huxford and others brought up, the City Council has formed a 3-person kind of subcommittee of council members, Council President Ewing, Council Member Frederick, and Council Member Jorstadt. Staff is, basically in a support role. I think we're going to assist the council members as they need background information and additional items. I think the idea, and I don't want to speak for the council, is to not have it just sit there. I mean, I think they want this subcommittee to work pretty rapidly, so that it can come back before the full council after they make any identified refinements to the language that was recommended by the Planning Commission. So there obviously still would need to be a public hearing before the full City Council to consider any ordinance that revises that section of the municipal code. So staff is currently on standby and will be assisting council members on that. Wanted to touch base just on a couple items as well. So we introduced some additional code amendments as part of your last meeting. So we're going to be briefing the City Council probably on June 28th, just so that they can kind of provide some preliminary feedback before their summer break. We're going to be briefing them on the storage facilities amendment. So we'll be bringing that to them to kind of just have a general discussion of scope and the general idea of creating more clear and objective standards related to storage facilities. So that we expect to happen on June 28th. And then we would bring that back. We would expect to probably bring that back before the Planning Commission, likely at the first meeting in August, after we've had some additional feedback from the City Council and have an opportunity to work on some draft code language. So you should expect, we're not having the July 6th meeting, as a reminder. So you have a well-deserved break for 4 weeks, actually for 5 weeks. So that'll be nice to enjoy if we ever get any summer around here. And so, yeah, that's on a couple of the code projects. And then I had a check-in meeting. We have kind of bi-weekly meetings with our consultants. We have Burke Consulting, who's on board to do the housing action plan. I was just going to share my screen real quick. The planning commission at your meeting, your May 18th meeting, had identified that you wanted to take a pretty active role. So we've identified some potential community workshops that we think could be hosted as part of an already scheduled planning commission meeting, and where the planning commission can really take that role and kind of hearing directly from the community. So I just wanted to check in with commissioners, make sure if we're looking at potentially having one of those in September and also in January, that commissioners would be comfortable with that. And really by then we'll be back at the mill. We are not trying to cram in a couple dozen people into the public works training room. We're going to definitely wait until we have access to a facility that can host the public, but wanted to just check in with commissioners, make sure that you're still comfortable with kind of taking that very active role, having some community workshops as part of your scheduled meetings, and really think that that's a good way to get to the community involved and also to have the planning commission well integrated into the project. So just wanted to kind of get any, that'll be supplemented by a very robust online engagement component. And then we've identified some key stakeholders, including the development community, which commissioners had said was very important to get that feedback from the development community, which we agree, in addition to homeowners, renters, kind of low-income renters, of kind of a very broad swath of the community. Commissioner Connor Davis brought up something interesting that I've had success with at other organizations, other cities, was engaging youth and really getting some creative ideas from them. I think as it relates to housing, we don't think of high schoolers or middle schoolers as far as providing like really good feedback, but I think that would be an interesting component of the community to really engage and just to get some, I had some amazing feedback, especially from high schoolers, on some comp plan work that I did where they really had some ideas specific to housing and infrastructure. And so I think that that's something that we're going to look at, potentially engaging youth as well and trying to utilize the school district to do some of that outreach. So maybe leaning on Commissioner Davis on that one. So just wanted to get any thoughts on the engagement and the general thought of hosting a couple of community workshops as part of the Planning Commission.
Heads nodding.
I think I'd be in support of that personally.
Okay. So those were the major items. And then, so we talked about short-term rentals. We talked about the storage facilities, and those are the two main ones on the code amendment side of things. And then, we're bringing on board the consultant for the Hartford and Machias industrial area analysis. And so that'll be interesting to see, and that'll be very well integrated into the periodic update as it relates to utilities and capital facilities, and really also land use, just kind of how we increase our employment density within those areas, what types of uses should be permitted. So it's an infrastructure analysis and then also a use analysis. So that'll be something that we'll be bringing back, before the Planning Commission periodically, just to keep you updated on that effort, and would love your feedback on that. But those were the major items related to long range plan M, and then I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Thank you. From your left hand, were there any questions from the commission? Oh. Okay, thank you. See Commissioner Davis leaning in. No. Okay. Well, I believe that takes care of our agenda tonight. Brings us to number 8, adjourn. Is there a move to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Move second. All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Are we not